My partner betrayed me because her father, a tyrant, ruined our career. My twin daughters came to my office because they needed a donor. Seated at my workstation, I took a sip of the coffee my aide had brought me, even though it contained an artificial sweetener I loathed. I jested about switching to green tea if she continued using it. My thoughts were consumed with an urgent intellectual property dilemma that needed sorting, but predictably, the national administration was sluggish in releasing the essential documents. Their notorious inefficiency was impeding my progress. I couldn't help but ponder how many layers of red tape a simple correspondence had to navigate before any action was taken. I felt immobilized, unable to proceed with my subsequent project, and the looming financial setbacks were worrisome. The culture of political correctness had made even the most straightforward tasks complex, making me feel increasingly disconnected from contemporary norms. Stephanie, my aide, entered and interrupted my reverie. "There's a young woman here to see you," she said. She refused to give her name but handed me this picture. As I took the photograph from Stephanie, a sense of foreboding enveloped me. Why now, I thought. The picture was of Rachel, my former spouse, and me on our wedding day, taken 2 decades ago. Memories of betrayal and heartache resurfaced. People believed I had returned to mend my wounds, and they were right. Back then, I was naïve about wealth and influence, but times had changed. "Discover if she's Laura or Jane Mitchell," I instructed Stephanie, handing her a thumb drive and a plastic bag. "If she is, show her the clip on this drive. If she desires a copy, give her everything and return the original to me. Once you're finished, come back, and I'll answer your queries." At 45, I had embraced bachelorhood. My short-lived marriage to Rachel June Parker had left me with significant trust issues. Now people had to earn my trust, which wasn't simple. Standing tall at 63 with a 36-inch waist and weighing 190 pounds, I frequented the gym for 2 hours after work. My dark brown hair was beginning to gray, but I still turned heads. Casual relationships were acceptable, but I had renounced marriage and love. An hour later, Stephanie returned with the young woman who looked resolute in her quest for answers. She sat down, her serious demeanor indicating she wouldn't leave until she obtained what she sought. Her sapphire eyes were intense as she waited for me to speak. "Do you know who it was, Jane?" she responded. "Who is she and why is she so distraught?" She wept, saying we've been deceived all our lives. If I'm correct, he was deceived as well. Jane is one of identical twins. The footage you viewed was her mother's final words to me before our initial divorce proceeding, 7 months before the twins were born. I learned about them through acquaintances, not from their mother. The remaining items on the drive elucidate what would transpire if I attempted to contact them. Her father, then with the CIA, orchestrated my dismissal from the FBI with spurious charges because he despised me. The documents suggest there's a bounty on my life if I interfere with them. He was a formidable, perilous man. She divorced me to marry my erstwhile best friend, with whom she had been having an affair for months. As far as I know, he's their biological father. How did she locate me, and what does she want? Jane discovered an old photograph in their attic with your name on it, searched for you online, and recognized you. She also found the original marriage certificate and divorce documents. She tracked you down through social media and other web searches. She's seeking a bone marrow match for her twin sister, who is running out of time. Why approach me, not their father? It doesn't add up, I responded. Her mother was with their father months before I knew her. Her father suspected Jane was mine and persuaded doctors to conduct a DNA test during the bone marrow test. Mr. Mitchell isn't their biological father. What are your thoughts? Stephanie inquired, her expression shifting to a broad smile as tears welled in my eyes. If Jane was right, it meant my ex had deceived me all those years ago. I pondered if I might be their father. I knew she was related to you the moment I saw her, Stephanie said, standing up. She has a resemblance that's unmistakable. Are you prepared for possibly the biggest surprise in years, Tom? Send the details on the drive to my publishers. Instruct them to release it in a manner that can't be traced back to me and to withhold my pen name because my life could still be in jeopardy. Emphasize the urgency of making it public swiftly. Then find someone to conduct a rapid DNA test and schedule an appointment. If I am their father, I want proof when I confront their mother. If it's accurate, I need a litigation attorney to fight for my parental rights. Clear my schedule. I need to go to Laura's hospital immediately, I said. Now I need to locate Jane. Jane, come in and introduce yourself, Stephanie called. Jane walked in, and the moment I saw her, I knew. She bore a striking resemblance to my younger sister at 16. I choked up, overwhelmed with emotion. Jane and I both began to cry. Stephanie took a few pictures with her phone to capture this momentous occasion, and then left us alone. Jane, you have an appointment for blood testing at 2. They promised expedited results, and I charged it to the corporate card, Stephanie said when she returned. I also arranged for you to meet your sister Sophie at a cafe at 4 and reserved a private table. Jane needs to understand our operations. Sophie will ensure her children are taken care of. She knows you have critical family news. I stood there, emotional and uncertain, watching Jane walk toward me. I had so many questions. I hugged her tightly as Stephanie closed the door. It was difficult to grasp that I might be a father. Jane seemed to feel the same, trembling as we left my office. We attempted to proceed cautiously, like taking baby steps to figure everything out. After arranging for the clinic to email the report, we headed out for a late lunch. I learned that Jane had skipped classes and driven all day until she had to rest at a station. I was furious that she would do something so reckless but held my tongue, realizing I might be reacting like an overprotective father. It also reminded me of something I would have done at her age. When we arrived at the cafe, I noticed Sophie's car. I know we're here to meet your sister, but why did Stephanie arrange this without consulting you first? Jane asked. You're about to witness what Stephanie and I saw when we first met you, I replied. It will elucidate why we believe you and Laura are my daughters, and why I was taken aback when the test came back positive. Can I call you Dad? Jane asked. I laughed and smiled. I'd be honored. The cafe was a notch above the typical chain with an excellent reputation. The proprietor and hostess led us to our private booth immediately. I ordered a bottle of sparkling wine and extra napkins. Sophie had her back to us, so I asked Jane to wait while I approached. Hi, sis. Thanks for meeting me, I said. Sophie looked up and said, You seem elated. What's happening? Sophie, stand up. There's someone I want you to meet, I said as Jane approached. This is Rachel's daughter, Jane. Sophie turned and stared, looking as if she saw a younger version of herself. They had similar features, long chestnut hair, high cheekbones, petite ears, azure eyes, and warm smiles. Oh my goodness, Sophie exclaimed. Tom, you should have given me a heads up. This is astonishing. How long have you known about her? Approximately 6 hours, Jane said emotionally. I surprised him at his office. Stephanie and Dad knew right away. Seeing you, I understand why. The server returned with napkins and understood our need for privacy. Sophie, through tears, explained that 3 more people would join us, so the hostess moved us to a larger table. Sophie urgently called her spouse, telling him to come over immediately, and informed our parents, declaring it a family emergency. Mom, worried, asked what was going on, but Sophie said she couldn't explain over the phone. Emotions were high. Then a message from Stephanie arrived, stating the publisher had released the news, and it would be on the 7 broadcast. We were just beginning to unwind with our first glass of sparkling wine when Sophie's spouse and my parents walked in. My dad's booming voice made me laugh as he said, There better be a good reason for this. Sophie and I stood to greet them. Mom, Dad, David, I'd like you to meet Rachel's daughter, Jane Mitchell, Sophie announced with pride. My mother immediately recognized the resemblance, and her face lit up with joy. She had always desired a granddaughter. My dad was taken aback, momentarily speechless. When he finally found his voice, he said, I can see the resemblance, but it's still a shock. My mom, too emotional to speak, sat beside Jane, holding her hand tightly. My dad, brimming with pride, ordered 2 more bottles of sparkling wine. Once our glasses were refilled, I stood up. I need to explain, I said, as Jane started recording with my phone. I told them how we had met and recounted the day's events. My dad then stood up. Jane, we don't need a DNA test to see what's obvious. Welcome to our family. You have 2 more aunts who are thrilled to meet you. Promise us you'll always consider this family your home. Jane took the phone and said, I came here searching for the truth, uncertain of what I would discover. Today has changed everything for Dad and me. We had no idea until now. Meeting Aunt Sophie showed me what unconditional love truly is. My twin sister Laura will be ecstatic. As I glanced around the table, everyone was visibly moved. Even my father, who rarely showed much emotion, had tears in his eyes. My mom, holding up 2 fingers, cried louder. I captured everyone's joyous tears before stopping the recording. Jane added her and her sister's contact information to my phone and texted Laura, showing me the video she sent. Jane's message read, "If what we believe is true, the DNA test will confirm it. Watch the 700 News. Love, your twin." My mother, still in disbelief, asked for more proof. Jane showed her photos of herself and Laura. My mom insisted on getting copies for her laptop and displayed them on the screen for everyone to see. Jane then turned off her phone and put it back in her purse, making me realize no one knew her whereabouts. My phone rang. It was Laura. I stood up and moved to a quieter area to answer. My dad noticed my tears and gave me a questioning look. Jane mouthed, "It's my sister." My dad nodded understandingly. I took the call. "Hello, this is Laura. After seeing the video, I had to call. She won't be home until at least 8 because she's stopping by the police station for an update on Jane. I'm pretending to know nothing. The police were here earlier and left their card. What should I do? Get him to watch the 7 News and pay close attention to what's revealed about me? Tell him you'll talk when your parents aren't around and show him the video? Give him my number and ask him to text first before calling." "He'll understand after watching the news," I advised. "Once we have the DNA proof, Jane and I might bring the entire family." "What do you mean?" Laura asked. After explaining Jane's efforts, I said, "The family will spread the word. I don't know how many will come, but those who can, will." "Why?" she asked. "Because in the Mitchell family, blood is thicker than water. If I'm not a match, someone else might be." "Just like that?" Laura asked skeptically. "No doubt. You'll see," I said with a chuckle. "We may be strangers now, but that won't last." We talked a bit more before saying goodbye, and she replied with relieved sobs. After ordering dinner, I explained to the family why Jane was here. Immediately, cell phones started buzzing as everyone spread the word and gathered potential matches. My mother took charge of organizing everything. "Jane, how did you get here?" my father asked. "I drove my old 1994 Caravan. It's barely holding together," she laughed. "It's in Dad's parking lot. Take that van to my dealership in the morning. You're not driving back in that." "It's a miracle you made it here," my dad said firmly. "At her age, you had just as much sense as she does," she replied, determined. "What do you plan to give her?" I asked. "She can pick out a new one," he replied with a wink and a smile. "If I could choose, it would be a 4x4. "I love the outdoors," Jane said. My dad responded with a big grin. "That's perfect. We all love the outdoors." If the weather allowed, we were always fishing, camping, or hunting. He began reminiscing about the summer I learned to water ski and barefoot, sharing many stories like he was holding court. Both my parents insisted Jane stay with them for the night, agreeing it wouldn't look right for us to be alone. After dinner, Dad drove them to her van and then brought it home. My mother was ecstatic, already planning how to spoil her new granddaughter. Dad ended up waiting until 2 a.m. Around 11 p.m., the police investigator called me. It took him 2 hours to complete a background check on me. The media was buzzing with questions about the information I released. We discussed the situation and related issues. Seeing the 3 generations in the video had answered many of his questions. I told him we were expediting DNA tests to confirm our relationship and that Jane was with my parents. Once confirmed, we would return to see if I could be a match for Laura. I asked him to buy us some time and promised to keep him updated on our progress. Laura later told me he reported back to her about our conversation. I was confronting my past again, but with a new perspective. This time, I wouldn't be intimidated by my ex-wife's family's power and money. I would leverage the media, the courts, and the truth to my advantage. I had the resources, the proof, and a growing determination. I didn't seek revenge, just justice through the truth. I was ready to take on 4 people and the national government. The next morning, I was in my office ensuring any schedule changes wouldn't affect me much and setting up tasks for Stephanie while I was away. Stephanie kept checking the email accounts like an overprotective mother, questioning me about my day and extracting all the details she could. To be honest, I never tired of looking at Stephanie Brown. In her youth, she must have been every teenage boy's dream. Her naturally styled auburn hair accentuated her soft features, and her piercing hazel eyes and full lips were still captivating. As a single man, I often admired her but was thankful she never caught me looking. Finally, she received the DNA test results, printed them, and exclaimed, "It's confirmed. You are her father." Stephanie immediately called the lab to send the information to Laura's specialist and began searching for the toughest litigation lawyer in New York. After vetting a few, she selected the best and arranged a Skype chat. The lawyer agreed to work on a percentage basis, confident it was a slam dunk with the DNA proof. We would go after my ex-wife, her husband, and her parents for denying me my parental rights. The restrictive court order against me would be overturned, proving their deliberate actions. The supposed contract on my life, even if not factual, would demonstrate their attempts to intimidate and control. The lawyer saw the potential for a significant case, even before involving the government. I asked Stephanie to send a dusty gray box from the safe to my new lawyer. Inside was critical evidence that Rachel's father had tried to ruin my career and marriage. Gathering this proof had taken years of effort, cutting through layers of bureaucracy. Eventually, a police officer leaked a video, changing the story into one of a runaway daughter finding her biological father to save her sister, which caused a media storm. "Mom, it's confirmed," I said over the phone. "I have 2 daughters. Thank God. Be ready to leave by 8 a.m. from the car lot. I'll inform everyone." "Have you contacted your daughters?" she asked. We were driving a fully loaded 2-year-old Jeep Cherokee, heading to East New York. Jane and I led the convoy with my parents in a tour bus and 35 other vehicles following us. Just as we were on the move, my phone rang. Jane answered and put it on speaker. "CNN is tracking you," Laura informed us after exchanging greetings. "There's a tour bus with a sign that says, 'The Mitchells are coming. 1 out of 150 should be a match. We have the DNA test confirming he's our father.'" "I'm driving a new 2-year-old Jeep Cherokee," Jane responded. "Dad said if it was verified, a lot of family would come, but I never anticipated this," Laura said. "It's given me hope I never imagined. I can't remember feeling this good." Dad's family spread the word and people emerged from everywhere. I met so many relatives this morning. It will take multiple introductions to remember their names. I met first, second, and even third cousins. "I'm so proud I want to change my last name to Mitchell," Jane declared. "I never knew families like this existed. I was so overwhelmed I nearly drove off the road." That's when I decided to write about this incredible experience in my next book. My daughters were still talking about Jane's experiences when Laura said she had to go. Her mother had just walked in. "Dad, are you okay?" Jane asked, concerned. "I saw you get very emotional. How do you think I feel?" I discovered I have 2 daughters who were raised by my ex-wife and a former friend without my knowledge. One is vibrant and full of life. The other is on the verge of dying. One is so strong and independent she moves mountains without a second thought, just like I would. "And she wants to take my name," I replied, my voice thick with pride and emotion. "Jane," I continued, "I was so focused on saving my sister's life that I didn't consider the impact on you. I wasn't a good match because I inherited a faulty gene from our mother. The emotional turmoil I've caused will linger for days. Can you forgive me? For what? For coming into my life and turning everything upside down? No. That's what life is about. You've given everyone another person to love. You've given me a chance to be a real dad," I said, tears streaming down my face. "Your grandparents adore you. My mother is so proud to see her face in you. It means everything. You and your sister have become her favorites by birthright. She's been spoiling us. We went shopping, and if she bought me something, she got one for Sue, too," she laughed. "She said she had years of spoiling to catch up on. That's Mom. You'll find it impossible to distance her from you." "I know I've tried," I said. "Sophie and my sisters will brag about this for weeks. By the end, this will become a family legend shared for years." We learned that as soon as Rachel saw the live news feed about our arrival, she started having severe panic attacks. The walls she had built around her lies were crumbling. Laura, feeling strong and empowered, confronted her as soon as she turned off her phone. "Mom, why did you hide the truth about our real dad?" Laura demanded. When she got no answer, she pressed harder. "You hid the truth from us, made decisions about our lives. What gave you the right to play God? Even Dad didn't know. If Jane hadn't found out about him and sought the truth, would you have let me die?" Rachel had no answers, never expecting the truth to come out. Her father had hated Tom from the start and did everything to drive him away. Fortunately, Laura's doctor walked in at that moment. We received DNA from a man we didn't know, proving he is Laura's biological father. He is coming to be tested, and there's a good chance he's a bone marrow match. He should be here tomorrow afternoon, and for his protection, Hell be under guard, the doctor said before leaving. Mom, my bio dad is coming with 140 others in case he's not a match. He wants to give me a fighting chance, Laura stated. Why? Rachel asked. To him and his family, blood is thicker than water. Though I'm a stranger to them, I am family, and family comes first, she replied. You had to know we look like our real dad's mother. Watch this video. It proves everything. Rachel watched the video of my family meeting Jane. There was no doubt. 3 generations shared the same face. She could no longer deny the truth. Her daughters had proof, and her husband's actions were backfiring. Then a man appeared at Laura's room entrance asking for Rachel. When she admitted she was Rachel, he handed her a large legal envelope saying, "You have been served." Rachel fell to her knees, sobbing. Laura, furious, felt no pity. Mom, why did Grandpa put a contract on my bio-dad's life? Laura asked, knowing she wouldn't get an answer. Brian Jackson had just left a corporate meeting. As he walked down the hall, he was served with legal papers. He sat down in the reception area to read them. The first document was a lawsuit against him and his wife for denying Tom his legal rights as the father of his daughters. The second was against his in-laws and himself, accusing them of conspiring to ruin Tom's marriage and career. It was clear Tom was seeking revenge, demanding sole custody of his daughters. He argued that if Jane hadn't found him, he would never have known about them. He claimed moral abandonment, suggesting Rachel and Brian would have let Laura die to keep their secrets. Proving otherwise in court would be difficult, given the media coverage. Brian remembered when he and Tom were university roommates and football teammates. Both had pursued Rachel, but Tom won her over. Brian had even been the best man at their wedding. However, Rachel's father never approved of Tom due to his background. He convinced Brian to pursue Rachel, and Brian agreed. With her father's influence, Tom was kept busy with FBI assignments, leaving Rachel and Brian alone together. Eventually, Rachel and Brian became lovers, while Tom was undercover for 2 months. Her father had recorded their affair and confronted Tom with the evidence when he returned. Rachel, unaware she was pregnant, thought her missed periods were due to stress. Delighted, her father saw Tom file for divorce immediately. When the twins were born, it was clear Tom was their father. However, Rachel's father had already falsely accused Tom, resulting in his unjust dismissal. It took Tom 4 years to clear his name, during which he left the area under a cloud of disgrace. Meanwhile, Rachel and Brian married and had 2 sons. The unedited tapes would later reveal the conspiracy between Rachel's father and Brian to undermine the marriage. Brian pondered how Rachel would react when this truth came to light. Jane and I arrived at our final stop of the night around 10 p.m., utterly exhausted after a 16-hour drive. We ordered a light meal to our rooms and fell asleep quickly, only to wake at 6 a.m. to the wake-up call. Jane and I departed early. I had a clandestine meeting scheduled with a police officer and an FBI representative. The rest of our group left at 8 a.m. for the 7-hour drive. Jane dropped me off at the East Police Department, where I met Detective Richard Grant and FBI agent Ryan Davis. We discussed Rachel's father's interrogation for over an hour and a half. I provided my lawyer's contact details and left a thumb drive containing all my evidence. I was placed under official protection until my departure, escorted by security at the hospital. I underwent a blood draw to determine my eligibility as a bone marrow donor. As I approached Laura's private room, I overheard Jane and Laura in conversation. The hospital staff recognized me as the author, and I signed a book for one of the nurses. Walking into Laura's room, Jane exclaimed in surprise, "Dad!" Laura looked frail, her skin loose, reflecting her nearing end-of-life stage. Despite this, her smile was broad, eyes bright with hope. "Laura, they're rushing the test results. They should be in within 30 minutes. The rest of the family is checking into their hotels. My parents are currently having their bone marrow drawn and will meet you soon. If there's more than one match, the doctor plans for a simultaneous double transplant in both arms," I explained, trying to maintain composure. Laura broke down in tears, and I sat on the edge of her bed, comforting her until she calmed. Jane captured a poignant photo of us both in tears of joy and relief. She was beaming with pride, rightfully so. I realized the immense effort she had put forth, and I was overwhelmed seeing my 2 daughters together for the first time. "Grandma, Grandpa, come meet my sister," Jane announced excitedly. The 5 of us engaged in conversation for over an hour, until Laura's doctor entered, smiling. "My mother and I are perfect matches for Laura," I announced. Dr. Proctor asked if we were prepared for surgery check-in at 7:00 a.m. the next day. Both my dad and I agreed. Thank God. We prayed for a miracle all the way up, I said. Don't you need my parents' permission? Laura asked. Normally, yes. However, we received a court order this morning, thanks to Mr. Mitchell, allowing us to proceed if he or a relative is a match. The judge believed that your mother and her husband weren't prioritizing your needs. Mr. Mitchell will cover all non-insurance costs, Dr. Proctor explained. Jane smiled. I'm not surprised, sis. With what Mom and Brian did, Dad had no choice but to use the courts to prevent delays. A security guard then alerted us that we were about to be featured on national news. Laura switched the TV to CNN, revealing my identity as the author of a popular book series worth an estimated $50 million. Jane, Laura, and the doctor were astonished, while my parents looked at me in shock. They had no idea. They thought I was merely an independent corporate financial advisor. My God, Dad, Laura exclaimed. I've read all your books. They're fantastic. I chuckled. After my former life was shattered, I had to reinvent myself. Writing became my therapy. The success of my first book was a turning point, and it only grew from there. I keep my books current, exposing raw truths about world events, societal views, and morals, whether people like it or not. For the first time in 20 years, I checked into a hospital alongside my mom. My new daughter wanted to share a room with me, but hospital security wouldn't allow it. Jane spent the evening running between 3 different rooms. My dad called relatives to update them. Rachel and Brian arrived after work, greeted with coldness. Laura informed them she was being prepped for surgery, set to receive a double bone marrow transplant the next morning due to a court order. How? Rachel asked. Mom, my bio dad and his mother are perfect matches. Both are donating so I can recover fully, Laura calmly explained. Mom, do you know who Edward King is? He's your favorite author? Well, Edward King is a pen name for Thomas James Mitchell, my bio dad. Laura dropped the bombshell. Rachel and Brian turned pale. They had hoped the court case would quietly disappear, but Tom's net worth proved he wasn't after money. He sought justice. Tom had always believed in law and order, which had made him a successful agent until his termination. Mom, did you know your father has been in FBI custody all day? You might want to check with Grandma to see if he's home. Can you explain why this is happening? Laura demanded with a smile. Jane was somewhere in the hospital, either in Dad's room or Grandma Mitchell's. If Rachel and Brian wanted to see her, Jane and I were in my hospital room discussing how she would handle her mother when Rachel found her. A security guard knocked and poked his head in. Mr. Mitchell, do you know these two? He inquired. Miss, fiance, didn't you see my ring? Jane answered as she opened the door for Rachel and Brian. Dad, I wouldn't trust these two for a moment. They're just trying to cover their backs. You don't know the half of it, Jane, Sarah began. Your dad's lawyer has video evidence showing your stepfather receiving a check from your grandfather as payment to break up your parents' marriage. If successful, he would manage your grandparents' finances for a 3 annual fee. How do you know this is true? Rachel demanded. And who are you? Mom, she's Dad's fiance and a skilled researcher. Her name is Sarah Williams, and I trust her more than you, Jane asserted firmly. Rachel's face drained of color. Her daughters were distancing themselves, and there was nothing she could do. Sarah spoke the truth, and I backed her up. I instructed my lawyer to release all video and audio tapes to the FBI, including a letter from Rachel's father, admitting he paid for the recordings out of spite. He didn't care about the cost, or who he trampled over to get what he wanted. I said, my eyes locked on Rachel. She turned to Brian, searching for a denial, but his guilty expression said it all. In that moment, Rachel realized the depth of loss when I walked away, the only man who truly loved her. Sarah, a piece of advice, don't let anyone manipulate you like I did, Rachel said. Then turning to me, she added, Tom, I need to talk to you alone after the surgery. Right now, I have to go home and think. Jane, will you walk me to my car? Jane nodded. I'll be back soon. Mom and I need to discuss a few things. Sarah, stay with Dad until I return. We watched them leave. Rachel held it together until she was out of sight, then broke down in tears. Both Sarah and I understood that she had just realized the full extent of what had been done. Brian, who had always lived a privileged life, was paralyzed by fear. The truth had surfaced, shattering their lives. Rachel would never trust him again. Tom, I dreaded this day. I never thought you'd return. If we had met by chance, I could have ignored it, Brian said. I never saw this coming. It's best I leave and say nothing more. He left, leaving us in silence. I turned to Sarah, seeing her blush for the first time as I looked at her with genuine affection. I was finally opening myself up. Was she playing me, or was she finally revealing her true feelings? Did I love her as a friend or something more? Either way, my daughters had awakened me. I had been living in others' shadows, finding joy in their excitement instead of creating my own. Sarah, we need to talk while I'm recovering, I said softly. These past few days have opened my eyes. I got comfortable on the sidelines instead of being in the game. Tom, when I got divorced, you stepped in. My kids were still young, and you've been more of a dad to them than their biological father. From soccer games to father-daughter dances, you were always there. I know why you pay me more than the going rate. You want to ensure the kids in your heart are well cared for, Sarah said. On their birthdays, you always went all out, making them the envy of their friends. During summer breaks, you took us on special trips, creating lifelong memories. You answer their questions like a father should. They love you, and you love them. Your only problem is your fear of commitment. I tried to speak, but couldn't. Sarah was right, and her words hit me hard. So did Jane's. I walked over to Sarah and sat beside her, taking her hand and looking into her eyes, gathering my thoughts. Rachel betrayed me, her father intimidated me, and my best friend deceived me. I lived with constant threats. I put myself in protection mode until a few days ago. Now that I've realized it, can we go on our first real date, or is it too late for you and me? I asked. Took you long enough, you old fool, Sarah said before kissing me. I'm texting our kids to tell them we're now a couple and working things out. Pretty confident, I said with a smile. I texted Jane, thanking her and asking if everything was okay. She responded, Mom didn't know. She's taking it hard and won't be back tonight. Let Laura know. Sarah and I went up to Laura's room. After introducing Sarah as my girlfriend, we told her what had happened earlier and showed her Jane's text. We had just finished when my sister Sophie walked in. I just had to meet her, Sophie said. Sarah, what are you doing here? I want to say something, but Sophie figured it out, I replied. He finally got it, didn't he? Sophie said with a smile. Took him long enough. Laura, this is your Aunt Sophie, and the man coming in is your Uncle Michael, Sophie's husband. You'll soon learn we speak our minds, like it or not. I excused myself and went to the nurse's station, texting Jane to ask about Laura's pizza preferences. She replied that Laura likes everything but anchovies. I ordered 3 extra-large pizzas and 3 2-liter sodas for quick delivery. I also called Dad, asking him to bring Mom up in 30 minutes for a pizza party. We pushed the no-eating 4 hours rule but got carried away. The head nurse came in to calm us down but left with a slice of pizza. Later, she stopped me and said, Your actions lifted the spirits of the whole floor. I can't thank you enough. At 5 a.m., they took me and my mom to prepare for the operation. We supported each other until we were wheeled in. I stayed awake until the medication kicked in. When I woke up, it was done. Now came the waiting and praying. Dr. Proctor informed everyone that the bone marrow transfer went well, but it would take a few hours to see if it was successful. Hearing this, most of the family started preparing to go home. Sarah, I said, is the worst patient ever. But I'm not sick, I replied. You're like a bull in a china shop, impatient, unruly, and miserable. Keep it up, and you'll get a bad reputation, Sarah told me. Sarah said my mother was doing well. When she was sure I was stable, she gave me my phone back. The first texts I saw were from Sarah's kids, both asking when she would get her engagement ring and when they would meet their new sisters. Sarah, your kids are smart, I said, showing her the phone. I told them I was coming to watch over you after the operation. They had a lot of questions, and the whole story came out. They weren't surprised. They said, Mom, he's always treated us like his own. Most of our friends envy us for having him as a dad. We've always seen him as our real father, Sarah said, her eyes moist with tears as she read the note. I guess we won't have a long engagement, I replied with a grin. Have you heard from the twins? Jane and her mother are with Laura. She's doing well under the circumstances. Even though she's still on medication, she's full of questions, Sarah informed me. Jane told her about the pizza party. Laura can't believe how much she resembles her aunt and grandmother. She's eager to have a girls' day out with them when she's better. Get me my pants. I need to see her myself, and then check on Mom, I insisted. The nurses tried to stop me, saying it was too soon after surgery, but I wouldn't be swayed, so off we went, hand in hand. Surprisingly, my pain was manageable. Sarah and I immediately noticed Laura's improvement. Her complexion looked healthier, and the sparkle in her eyes almost brought me to tears. "Who are Olivia and Daniel Taylor?" Jane asked. "They're my kids, ages 14 and 12. "Why?" Sarah replied. "I got a Facebook friend request from them this morning." "So did Laura," Jane said. "Both of you need to read what they sent me," I said, handing Jane my phone. She read it, smiled, and passed it to Laura. "I need this back to add their phone numbers to my contacts," I said. Rachel then asked if she could talk to me privately, so we went to the waiting room. "Tom, I had a long talk with my mother last night. She admitted that she remembered Dad's hatred towards you, but never thought it would go this far. My daughters want to finish the school year here and then move in with you. They want their last name changed to yours. They feel that what Brian and I did is unforgivable," Rachel revealed. "I can't argue with them. They made it clear they'd take me to court if I refused. They no longer trust me, and I can't blame them." "Will you take them? You know my family wouldn't let me say no, no matter how I felt." "I will gladly take them, and so will Sarah. Well, just need a bigger place." "I'll drop the suit against you if you agree to joint custody," I replied. "The suit will still proceed against the rest of your family. The twins are old enough to decide the rest." Rachel agreed to joint custody. I offered to pay for their name change, but she declined. We walked back into Laura's room together. The girls watched us intently. "Sarah, it looks like we're going to need at least a 6-bedroom house," I said. Sarah smiled, and the girls squealed with delight. "Rachel, your father and I agree." "You get your wishes," Sarah said. "If Sarah agrees, I'll call the lawyer tomorrow to start the legal process for your name change." "Tom," Sarah asked, "are you ready for this? A house full of teenagers?" "No one's ever truly ready, but we adapt. I'm just getting used to the idea of 2 carrying my name," I said. "Make that 4. Olivia and Tim want you to adopt them. They're already signing their names as Mitchell," Sarah said. "Call James Smith's firm to start the paperwork, then text the kids to let them know our plans. We need to find out which areas have the best schools so we know where to look for our new home," I suggested. Jane picked up her phone, opened her contacts, and made a call on speaker. "Hello?" Olivia said. "Who is this?" "This is Jane, your soon-to-be older sister. Is Daniel with you?" Jane explained. "Prove it." "I can't just take your word for it," Olivia said. "Dad taught us not to take calls or messages from unknown sources without proof." "Seriously? Is this a scam?" "Olivia, Tom and I are getting married," Sarah said. "You're talking to Tom's daughter, Jane. We're all going to be Mitchell. Laura and I are changing our last names, and your dad and I have started the process for him to adopt you and change your name to Mitchell too," Jane added. "Awesome. Tell Dad it's about time." "How is Laura?" Daniel replied. "We've been waiting to hear." Sarah and I exchanged a look, witnessing the first conversation of our blended family. She squeezed my hand in support. "I'm getting better," Laura said. "So far, so good." "I'll text you both so you can add my number," Laura said. "Jane, our dad is the only father we've known. Our bio dad was gone before we even knew him. Your dad has been better than any of our friends' parents. Mom's been in love with him for a long time. When we all come together, we need to accept that we're siblings. Nothing more, nothing less," Daniel declared with resolve. "Olivia and I won't let anything disrupt our family unity." My daughters nodded in agreement. Sarah, her eyes shining with tears, said, "They've truly embraced your values and principles. You should be proud of them." "I am," I replied, feeling an immense swell of pride. We said our goodbyes for now and made our way to see my mom. Dad was with her when we walked in, catching them both by surprise. Dad noticed Sarah's expression and smiled knowingly. "Mom," I began, "you're already up and about. Have you seen Laura? How is she?" "She's improving," Mom replied. "Her complexion looks better and she's in good spirits, but it's still early days." "We need to have a serious conversation if you both have the time," I said. "We're not going anywhere, so let's hear it," my dad responded. "Laura and Jane will be living with me after the school year, and they'll be changing their last name to ours," I explained. "Rachel has agreed to joint custody and the name change. It was the twins' idea." "That's wonderful news," both my parents said in unison. "But that's not all," Sarah added. "Your son has decided to make an honest woman out of me. Margaret, are you ready to help plan a wedding?" Mom's eyes filled with tears, and Dad's smile broadened. They didn't need to say anything, we knew they approved. "I'll be adopting Olivia and Daniel, and they'll take my last name too. Sarah and I will start house hunting as soon as we get back," I added. "What finally made you come to your senses?" my dad asked, grinning. "We all knew how you both felt about each other. I've been trying to get your mother's approval to knock some sense into you. Evan Jackson, behave yourself. You're not at the yard selling a car, Mom said, playfully scolding him. Sarah, have you thought about your wedding plans? We haven't discussed it much, but since we're blending 3 families, it should be a family affair. Sophie can be my maid of honor, Tom's best man, his brothers-in-law as ushers, Laura and Jane as bridesmaids, Olivia as the flower girl, and Daniel as the ring bearer. Dad, will you walk me down the aisle with my father? Sarah asked with a grin. Depends on who's footing the bill, and if the reception is stocked with Jack Daniels, Dad replied, laughing. What do you think? Sarah asked. It's perfect. It will bring us all together. If that's what you want, let's do it, I replied. Should we invite Rachel? I wondered aloud. Both my parents firmly said no. Mom, Dad, in the coming weeks, the media will expose a lot. I'm suing the national government, Rachel's parents, and her husband. I believe Rachel was as much a victim as I was. I paid the price years ago, and now Rachel is paying in ways we can't even imagine. She thinks she's lost her daughters forever, I explained. Inviting her might help the twins and her rebuild their relationship and move on from the past. Sarah and my parents looked at me in awe. Where did that wisdom come from? My dad asked, genuinely surprised. These last few days have taught me a lot, I replied, holding Sarah's hand. Jane's arrival made me realize what's truly important in life. We returned to my room and I quickly fell asleep, exhausted from the surgery. Sarah stayed by my side and watched the news. Christopher Parker and Brian Jackson had been arrested for lying to the FBI. The person behind the contract on my life had turned state's evidence. My lawyer released details of my firing from the FBI, prompting an internal review. When I woke up, Sarah filled me in. Dr. Proctor informed us that my mother and I would be released the next day. You'll need follow-ups and to get your stitches removed, he said. Laura is doing better than expected. The big question is how she'll respond as she's weaned off her meds. We talked to my parents, who decided to stay in the city until Laura was on the road to recovery. They would fly back with us on the private plane. Dad booked into the same hotel as Sarah, and the bus driver was instructed to head back. Over the next few days, the media laid bare the deception, backstabbing, and political machinations that ruined my marriage and career. They spent a day dissecting how Rachel's father manipulated her into believing falsehoods. Rachel was publicly scrutinized. Sarah and I were headed to visit Laura one last time before going home. Dr. Proctor had proudly said she was on the path to a full recovery. Someone high up must have disliked the negative media coverage about the Fed's past dealings with me, because the security clearance my publisher and I were waiting for was suddenly approved. Within 2 weeks, over 1 million hard copies of my new book would hit the market. I had 2 first editions delivered overnight. After signing them, Sarah wrapped them up, and we hid them in a shopping bag. We made sure Jane would be there when we visited Laura. Your dad and I have set the wedding date for the first weekend in September, Sarah announced with a smile. Aunt Sophie will be my maid of honor. I was wondering if you two would be my bridesmaids. Laura's eyes lit up. Absolutely, Sarah. When I first walked into Dad's office, I was terrified. But you recognized me immediately and said, "You're Rachel's daughter. How are we going to handle this?" It stunned me how you accepted me from day one. I'd be honored to be in your wedding, and I'd love to call you Mom. The 3 of them hugged, and Laura literally jumped out of bed with excitement. Once things settled down, I pulled out the gifts and handed each of them a signed first edition of my book with the inscription, "To one of the 2 prettiest ladies who call me Dad. With love, Edward King or Thomas James Mitchell." Laura was over the moon when she unwrapped it. It was my biggest book yet, over 650 pages. Her face beamed with pride, knowing it wasn't released yet. She flipped open the cover, read my note, and then burst into tears. "Dad, you've already done so much. I didn't need this," she sobbed, running into my arms. "Before you came into my life, the doctor said I only had a few days left. Jane knew it too. I don't know why she went into the attic, but I'm so glad she did because it brought us you." She hugged me tightly as Jane watched with tears in her eyes. "Dad, you should know Dr. Proctor believes if Laura had only received 1 transplant, it wouldn't have worked." The double transplant shocked her body into responding. "In the last 6 days, she's gained 12 pounds, Jane explained. "I didn't know if you would come, but you didn't hesitate. You brought a whole tribe. Thanks to the family, I'm getting my best friend back." "How's your mom holding up?" I asked. trying to lighten the mood. She's filed for divorce and is going to therapy to deal with a lifetime of lies. She now understands what you went through and is ashamed, Laura said. She says only someone who has experienced it can understand that it's a living hell. Her work and friends are her support. Mom is strong and we'll get through it. The key will be getting her to trust again. Right now, she doesn't know who or what to believe. Jane, even with family support, regaining trust can take years. It requires an unexpected act of faith. For me, it was Jane walking through my office door, I said. Thank God you did, Sarah added with a chuckle. Tom had me thinking I'd die an old maid waiting for him. Now girls, stand by your father so I can capture a few photos. The best one will be an 8x10 for his desk. When we stepped off the plane, we were greeted by Sarah's parents and children. The kids nearly knocked me down with their excitement, which was contagious. My dad enjoyed hearing them call me Dad. I realized Daniel would have 2 older sisters and 1 younger, just like me. Olivia hugged my mom and said, "I'm so happy you're becoming my grandmother." I reflected on how quickly my life was transforming with these unexpected blessings. Sarah and I decided to postpone our initial plans until after the wedding. Sarah knew our needs, so I let her handle finding a new home. This gave me time to write my first fiction book. My previous works had exposed corruption and cover-ups. We stayed in touch with the twins, and Sarah found a beautiful 25-acre property with an old barn that needed some TLC. Laura was improving and returned to school part-time. We hired a firm to design our dream house with steel and brick, featuring an outdoor kitchen, large patio, pool, and a 4-bay garage. With Sarah reducing her office hours, I had more time to focus on writing. With the help of an editor, I completed over 350 pages, publishing my first book under my real name. Rachel used my lawyer to divorce Brian, securing alimony and covering education costs. My cases were in mediation, and the opposition had lost the will to fight. Olivia, Daniel, Sarah, and I eagerly awaited the twins' arrival after their last school day. Daniel spotted them driving up our new driveway, and we all rushed outside to greet them. As they stepped out of the Cherokee, I was amazed at Laura's recovery. She looked indistinguishable from Jane. Sarah whispered, "Well, figure it out." Daniel, playing the protective big brother, carried their luggage while Sarah proudly showed off the house.